Welcome to the Powell Bros Movie Reviews, brought to you by our supporters at Patreon. In case you have been under a rock, the world around us is in ruins. A nihilistic worldview permeates the film industry. Sodomites control the cultural narrative. Corporations run by sexual perverts and money launderers are constantly pumping out garbage content in order to entertain us. We here at the Powell Bros are over it. We want to give honest reviews of movies that expose the wicked and glorify the good. We want to find stories that have masculine male characters who slay dragons, and feminine female characters who need saving. We want stories and want to see creators who have an artistic prowess that shames and defeats our enemies. We are tired of the nihilistic moral ambiguity of modern-day entertainment. And we want stories that change people, that inspire people towards goodness, truth, and beauty. And most importantly, we want the entire entertainment industry to bow the knee to Jesus Christ, who is Lord of all. Yes, we are Christians, and we are unashamed of that. And if that bothers you, too bad. Now, if you do wish to support us in our mission, please head over to patreon.com/the Powell Bros, or follow the link in the show notes. There you will gain access to our exclusive show, the Powell Bros Mini Reviews, as well as early access to both movie chronicles and movie reviews. Now, on with the show. As well-known pastor and author Douglas Wilson once said, "Desperate times call for faithful men, and not for careful men. The careful men come later and write the biographies of the faithful men, lauding them for their courage." End quote. We live in desperate times, and we need faithful, bold, and anti-fragile men who stand up for what is right, and we need stories about those men who have come before us to pave the path that we walk on today, a path that is often trampled on by others. We talk often on this podcast about how stories should move us. They should inspire us and teach us to love that which is good, beautiful, and true. Does 2000's The Patriot do just that? Well, stay tuned to find out. Welcome to the Powell Bros Movie Reviews, where we review movies and talk about story, character development, plot, and have a good time doing it. Welcome. As always, I'm one of your hosts, Trent, joined by my other host, Tobiah. Tobiah, how are you doing?
Doing good. Yep. Excited for this one. One of your picks.
Definitely. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm loving this season.
Yeah.
Having a lot of fun.
Yeah. No, it's been a great season.
And this
so
one
far.
I'm ultra hyped for.
Yeah.
Yes, this movie has problems, but hey, this was a fun one. A moving one. An aspiring one. But before I get into that, Tobiah, what were your initial thoughts of this film?
Yeah, so we are reviewing The Patriot, which is your choice.
Oh, yeah. That's the one we're doing, by the way.
And, yeah, initial thoughts. So, man, for some reason, when I watched this movie, like, I couldn't understand why, but I just kept wanting to cry, and I couldn't explain why. It's like every
I just wanted to cry.
Every
I don't
20
cry.
minutes, every 20 minutes, I'm like, why do I want to cry right now? It's a great movie. It's a
We don't cry here.
very inspiring movie, very deep movie, and very manly movie, very patriotic movie. A lot of heroism and bravery, a lot of fighting against all odds and overcoming battles and losing some battles and still pushing through. This movie tells just a really good war story and paints I don't know how well of a picture, but it paints a picture of what war is like and the sacrifices of war and the cost of war. But yeah, no, this movie goes into all those nooks and crannies and really drives the heart and pushes to just tug on all those strings, and I think it did it pretty well, and I definitely enjoyed this movie. So yeah, Trent, what are your thoughts on this movie?
Yeah, no, I'm glad to hear all that. And yeah, I mean, same thing. I mean, I don't think there's another movie that moves me as much as this one, except for maybe Lord of the Rings or Saving Private Ryan's up there. Man, I don't know, maybe Braveheart. But this one, I think this one takes the cake. It is a very inspiring, very moving movie. It just gets you fired up, makes you want to go fight some redcoats, makes you want to go take back our freedoms that we've lost since 1776, or the freedoms we've lost in the last century. It makes you wonder why we live in such a cowardice nation today, with cowardly men without backbones. It really makes it seem like things were better then. Not that things weren't hard. Things were hard. Like, yes, the death rate of children were very high back then. There were sicknesses and diseases and the plagues and stuff, but it was filled with people that faced hardships and that overcame hardships and that didn't cry victim every other day and whine about things that aren't worth whining about. And it makes you think of a time when the occasion required men to stand up, and men stood up and did the right thing in the face of hardship, in the face of death, in the face of war and the consequences of war. And anyways, so I love this movie a lot. I do think it has problems. I think it goes over the top sometimes. It feels almost like a superhero movie in some senses, with some of the battles, some of the fight scenes, and some of the things that Mel Gibson's character does. But that's okay. It's a war movie. It's not necessarily based off a true story. It's inspired by true events and true characters in history during the War for Independence. I just enjoy this movie, and like I said, it's very moving. Especially as a father to 3 boys, it is gut wrenching and actually hard to watch at times, but it's inspiring in all the more. And yeah, there's a reason why this is my number 2 favorite film.
Yeah,
at least for this season, and why I chose it where it's at. And yeah, it's a great movie
for sure. Yeah, no, I think, I don't know, a lot of, I think, longer movies just tend to have issues too. I don't know if that's why this has issues, but it is long.
Well, I'm curious. Yeah, what would you think of that? Like, as far as the length of the film and how well
it flows pretty good. You don't have like long scenes where you're just like, man, this scene is just going on forever for no reason at all. Every scene had a point and a reason, and I think it's just the story just kept on going. And it's not like any scenes weren't relative to the story like some movies do, some long movies do. This one definitely kept and stuck to the story, but it just kept it was really long, and it kept on going.
Yeah, like there's just a lot that happened. And I think, like Shawshank Redemption, they do a decent job at passing time. Like even the scene when Gabriel, his oldest son, is narrating. He after he goes off to fight for the Continentals, he is kind of talking about the hardships of the war and the things that he's faced, and they show like glimpses, like his friend dies right next to him, and he's just showing how hard it is on him and whatnot. And I don't know, it was like at least like quite a few months that had passed, and I think they did a good job at transitioning that and showing that, this much time has passed and this is where our characters are at and whatnot. And then throughout the whole film, like a lot of time passes. We go from like pretty much the beginning of the War for Independence somewhat towards the end of the war, leading up to the end of the war. Anyways, I was okay with it. Like, I feel like I was really even though like I've seen this movie before, I was really drawn into it. I was really attached. I cared about the characters. I was invested throughout the whole film. I wanted to see what happens next. I wanted to keep going. And then, of course, you get to like second and third acts, like they do drag on. Even the third act, though I think the third act was pretty decent for the most part, depending on when you would say the third act began, which we'll get into that. But I think it's pretty clear where it began. But even third act, well done. So yeah, those are my initial thoughts. Very masculine movie. I love Mel Gibson's character. And to kind of start us off, like kind of walking through the plot, this Mel Gibson's character, his name is Benjamin. I'm blanking on his last name.
Martin.
Kind of be
Martin.
Martin. Yeah, Martin. Yeah, Benjamin Martin. He is a father to 7 children, and but his wife has passed away, and his wife passed away, so he's a single dad raising seven children, I think 2 girls, 4 boys, and we meet him, and like in the first 20 minutes of this film, we learn pretty much everything we need to learn about our characters, about our villains, about our we'll get into the villain, but our villains, our heroes, the 2 kind of boy protagonists, and then even the other 2 boys, but the 2 boy protagonists, one of course doesn't make it very long. We'll get to there. Spoiler alert. I don't know if we need to ever clarify that. I mean, this movie's been out for 24 years. This came out in the year 2000, and we learned everything we need to learn about the characters. We learn from the beginning that, hey, Mel Gibson's character Benjamin, he has a past. He has a history that he has a lot of demons in his past that he's having to deal with. And the first line in the movie is praying that the Lord would grant him forgiveness, I'm pretty sure. And starting off with just so he has sins in his past that he's struggling with, that he's carrying around, weight that he's bearing. And on top of that, he's a father to these 4 children who don't have a mother, and he's learning how to raise them. We find out that he's a chair maker, or I guess he wants to make chairs, which they didn't go really anywhere with that. And I feel like there's got to be like an analogy in there that I didn't really figure out, because they, in the end, or there's something about the chair in the end, when he's in the colonel's office, or Cornwallis's office, there's the chair. Anyways, I'm diving way too deep in that. Anyways, chair maker, he tried to make a chair, it falls apart, and he's like, I can't make a simple chair. I don't know what that was all about necessarily, but we meet like I said, the 2 older boys. They are awaiting letters from, because they're in South Carolina, right?
Yeah,
right. They're down South Carolina, waiting letters from the state or whatever just to give news of the war, and they're waiting for like a newspaper to come in to find out what's going on, who's enlisted. It's because this is the beginning of the war for independence. The U.S. or the U.S. colonies are fighting for independence from Great Britain, fighting for independence for things that most of the founding fathers would be even more up in arms for if they knew where our nation was today. But either way, fighting for taxation without representation, fighting for freedom from the tyranny of the king of Britain, and so forth. So, beginning of the war, we're meeting, so there's a meeting that's called in the state capitol, and so Benjamin takes his 2 older boys with him to go visit, because they're eager. So we're learning that they're eager to learn not only about what's going on in the war, but is there a chance that they could fight? His oldest son, Gabriel, played by Heath Ledger, by the way. He's legendary actor. Gone too soon, but he does a great job in this one. He's relatively young, and his character is 18 in the movie. And so there's a conversation early on in the movie with his father, and he's asking his father, like, hey, why can't I fight? Like, why can't I want to go and fight? they get the newspaper finding out who's enlisted, and I don't know if it's one of his friends or someone he knows who's 17, so a year younger. He's already enlisted. He's going to fight, and Gabriel's like, why can't I, father? And clearly we see that Mel's character is, wrestling with the horrors that he experienced in war, because he fought in the French and Indian War, and there's they're implying that there's some history there. There's some not so things that he's not so very proud of that went on and during that war. And so anyways, he's wrestling with that, and get to the congressional meeting in the state capitol, and they're all debating whether or not South Carolina should join the war for independence that's happening up north. And there, it's 50-50, which that's how it was during this time. Like there were obviously some people that were actually loyal to Britain that lived in the colonies, and they were they were thought that why do we want our independence? Like, we've been given enough. Like, we don't need to fight for this. It's not worth it. And then there was those that were just more complacent and didn't care, didn't want to get involved. And then there were those that were like, no, we want to fight. We want to get our independence back. We want to win our independence from Britain. And so, where are we at? At the meeting, Mel voices his concerns about going to fight, and he makes a comment how I have 7 kids at home and no wife, and so I'm not going to fight because I don't want to die. He knows the cost of war. He's experienced it. He's seen it firsthand. I'm not going to fight, and I'm also not going to cast my vote that we should go fight. If I'm not willing to fight, I'm not going to ask others to fight in my place. And so he's like, I'm content with where things are at. And so you see a little bit of, like, you're wrestling with, okay, are they showing that he's being a coward? What's he dealing with internally? His son makes a comment about how, when his dad says, hey, I don't want you to go fight. And he's like, and he says, when you have a family, someday you'll understand. And then he's like, well, when I have a family, I'm not going to hide behind them. And that hit pretty hard on him. The vote pass, South Carolina decides they're going to join the war effort, and then Gabriel, he's like against his dad's wishes, which he's 18, but his dad doesn't. He's still under his dad's headship and is in his home, but his dad says, nope, I don't want you to, but he goes anyway. We also find out that there's a girl that he's interested in, and then our story kind of begins to pick up from there. Mm-hmm. Any thoughts? Anything you want to add to there? Just kind of set us up going forward.
No, I mean, you pretty much covered it all. Like, it's very pretty long intro, but it definitely sets the groundwork for for the movie, and just like what kind of person Benjamin is, and
we also, the opening shot is a shot of an axe that Ben has locked away, or in his room. There's a scene where his second oldest son Thomas, he picks it up and then asks about it, and he gets kind of upset about it. And it's like, I don't want you messing with this, and you don't want to know what I went through. And so he's kind of hiding his history, his past from his sons. But one thing we see clear is that he's raised his boys to be men of principle and conviction. They know what they believe. Like Gabriel, like, he knows he needs to fight, and he does go against his dad's wishes. And we can debate whether or not that was the right thing to do, but he chooses to do it because of what he stands for, because he wants to fight. But he quickly learns the consequences of it, and we have that montage where he learns, where he goes through a lot of hardships in the war and loses a close friend, and then it turns out the war has come pretty much close to home, because that's also one of the debates is like, if South Carolina chooses to fight, then the war will not be fought overseas. We're not fighting in Britain. We're going to be fighting in our backyards, in our front yards, and our homes. Our families are going to suffer. Those innocent people are going to suffer, which foreshadows most of the movie, because there's a lot of innocent people that are harmed because of this. So there are consequences to fighting for something that is worth fighting for. And that's set up pretty early on in the film. And so Gabe comes back home because he's fighting pretty close to home, which, you know, I don't know, that was a little odd, I guess. I think that, like, he just stumbles home, but it makes sense if he was fighting if the war is pressed in close, and that's what they were trying to tell us. And so he comes home, he gets nursed, he's injured, starts getting, so his family's nursing him back to health, and then the next morning he wakes up and there are troops marching on their land, because they own a lot of land. Troops have arrived and showed up, and things start getting a little crazy, and we meet our villain, Mr. Jason Isaacs himself, Lucius Malfoy. Yeah. One of I think the greatest villain actors of all time. As far as the character who plays villains, I think he does an awesome job. Now, what do you think about his character in this film overall?
Yeah, no, very menacing. We see pretty much right in the beginning how, I mean,
he's awful,
unhonorable and psychotic he is. And I think it was in that first scene where him and Benjamin are talking about, like, you know, because he was doing unhonorable things for war. Actually, I think it was in a later scene where they actually talk. He's like saying, you know, that's against the rules of war. You can't do that. Right. I think that was a later scene, but in that scene he does do things that are against the rules of war, and we just see right away that he's bound by no law, and he's uncontrolled, psychotic, bloodthirsty,
right, and sees anyone who stands against his king and country, if anyone stands against it, are worthy of death, whether you're an innocent civilian or you're a soldier, like. And he sees them as traitors and committing treason, essentially, upon the crown. And so he wants to rid the states of all those people, and he's willing to kill innocent people and do whatever it takes to accomplish that. If throughout the movie he's a little over the top bad, like he's just the absolute worst person ever, like just a terrible human being. We don't get a lot of his motivations. They do mention about, like, how his father, I think, left him when he was young. So they did include that a little bit. It's like, okay, this help us understand why he is the way he is somewhat, but also the fact that he's just that devoted, and through his eyes, every wicked man who chooses to do horrific things to other people, to harm innocent people, or even those that aren't innocent, but like harm others, they have a lens through which they see the world, and they find ways to justify the reason for doing the things that they do, and he has his justifications. It's just a little over the top at times. There's some pretty awful scenes in this movie. But as far as a villain, he's like, this is a terrible person, and he's clearly the villain. There's no sympathy towards him at all. He does seem like he's evil for evil's sake, except for the fact that, yes, in the context of the film, though, we know it's like, okay, on the side of the British, he absolutely hates those that are fighting for independence, any of those that oppose the crown, and so that's why he's doing things that he does, and so forth.
Yeah.
So he comes to Mel Gibson's front door, and we get the first tragedy of this film. And which also, one thing they do good, that you have, it's not just they don't just paint all the British as just terrible, though mostly they do, and a lot of them weren't as, like, historically they weren't as bad as these men are, but there were some terrible wicked men that fought for the British. But you have those characters that are very conflicted. In this first scene, we get one of his sergeants, or one of his colonels, he is a colonel, so one of his inferiors is really conflicted about what they decide to do. I think that they burn down his house and so forth, and kill the innocent, right? Because the war was brought to their front door, so they're nursing both the Brits and the Continentals, the Americans. Mel Gibson and his family and his slaves are all nursing these soldiers back to health and taking care of them. And Jason Isaacs' character comes in and is like, yeah, we don't care. Kill the wounded and burn this house down. Right? They burn it down.
Yeah. He wanted to show that anybody who helps the enemy will lose their house.
Right. And on top of that, Gabriel is caught, and basically Jason Isaacs decides that he's a traitor, and he wants to go he arrests him and is going to go hang him for standing against the crown. He calls him a spy because he brought letters of I can't remember what the letters were, but it was, he was a messenger delivering these letters. They find the letters. He's like, okay, so you're not for us, and you're one of the Continentals, so we're gonna take you away and hang you. And so, of course, being the good father that he is, Mel's character, he argues and fights against them, but doesn't physically go against them, which is interesting, which is helpful for his character, as far as us understanding his reservations and so forth. Yeah. So what do we see? His son Thomas, his second son, as Gabriel, his oldest, is getting taken away in handcuffs. Thomas runs to him and he's like, "No, I'm gonna fight for my brother. I'm gonna get him back. Like, my dad's not going to. I'm gonna do it." So he runs after his brother, and Jason Isaacs looks and sees him, pulls out his gun and shoots him. And this kid, I think he's 14 or 15. No, 15. Nope. Yeah, 15. And he just shoots him right there, which of course helps us see that he's willing to kill even children, essentially. And he even says, after he kills him, "Stupid boy," and just smirks, like completely careless. And of course this completely breaks Benjamin, as he just sees his son. Wasn't there a thing about he had another son that died? I feel like there was something like just like off, like before the movie even starts. I feel like there was something. I could be wrong.
I didn't notice.
So he had 8 kids and he's lost.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, maybe. I could be wrong, but Thomas is shot and he dies in the arms of his father, and this of course flips a switch for Mel's character. As Jason Isaacs walks off, Mel's like ready. He's ready for revenge, and so he runs in the house that was burning, which I love. I love the scene. The house is burning, and he walks in. Sorry. No problem. Go ahead.
I was just, before you get into that, I was just gonna kind of paint a picture, like, because we have this guy who he didn't want to start a war. He wanted to reason with the enemy. Like, that was his whole point in the courtroom, was he's like, we shouldn't fight them. Like, let's try and reason with them. And they even asked, like, "Aren't you a patriot?" And he's like, "Yes, I am a patriot." And
like, and he says, I stand against war, taxation without representation. I think each state should govern itself, and so forth. And, I believe in self-government.
But and then he was at the point, he's like, "I'm not willing to give my life for a war that I don't believe is necessary." And then we have this happen, and then he runs into the building, and you can continue on.
Yeah, he goes in the house that's on fire, and he like metal that goes into a fire. He comes out different. He's resolved and he's determined. You can just tell in his face that he's coming out with purpose now. I think it was symbolic that he went into the fire and then came out, and then he's ready to fight. He comes out with his axe, so that connects him to his past, and then he comes out with 2 guns as well, 2 rifles, and he gives them to his boys, his 2 youngest boys, who are like under the age of 10, very young. Maybe the oldest is 11 or 12, but young. And he's like, "Okay, boys, you remember how to use these?" Gives them the guns, and this is the moment where this movie made no the reason why this movie made no awards during award season back in 2000, because it didn't win any Oscars or Emmys or anything. This was like a huge uproar that the director and Mel Gibson would have these kids fight and wield guns. So, anyways, can imagine what people think about this movie today. So they go out.
I know.
And
why didn't he give it to the daughters?
Right. Yeah, I know. He should have given it to his daughters, and they should be like, I can do this, Father, Daddy. I don't need anyone's help. I can do it myself. I mean, which I'm sure that the girls probably do know how to shoot a gun, and they should. And he should teach the girls.
But there was the men were there and capable.
Right.
So,
he goes straight to the boys. Yeah.
If they weren't there and it was only the girls, then sure.
Yeah. Right. But yeah, he goes to the boys and he's like, all right, boys, let's do this. So first off, it shows that he's trained his boys to be good marksmen, good with a gun, and they go and they're scared, they're intimidated. Like, this is something they probably never thought they would do, and especially at this age. But they follow their dad. His dad's, we see leadership in his dad as he takes them. And he's like, okay, we're gonna go get your brother back. So we have the boys. They are sitting up on a hill, looking down at the British that are coming through, and they one thing that the dad reminds them, like, you guys remember how to shoot, and they says, remember, aim small, miss small, aim small, miss small, and he keeps repeating that. They keep repeating that, and just it shows that he's taught them well. He's taught them how to use a gun and how to shoot an enemy and how to shoot a target. And man, when I was watching this scene, I was like, man, this was a different time. And we do not have men like this. We do not have boys like this. We don't have fathers like this. And we should, and we need to. We lack hard men with backbones in our culture and our day and age. And this movie just shows that. And it shows that, like, because men were like this back then. Like, families were like this. Boys were raised to be marksmen, how to protect their family, how to protect their homes, how to protect their land, how to protect their country. And we don't see that as often really anymore today. So we need to wake up. America needs to wake up. Men need to wake up. Christians need to wake up to be ready to fight. So anyways, this scene, they take back they kill the soldiers. The boys, are able to take down all these men, and whether or not that's impractical, still a great scene. And they rescue the brother, and and then you have the scene where the dad is Benjamin's hacking this one guy to pieces basically with his axe, just showing that it's letting out his anger. He just lost his son, and he's also kind of going back to his old self, or get a glimpse of his old self, which was a big character moment for him, and where he's just hacking him, but also the moment where his boys both see him and look at him. Now, I wish this would have had more of a further impact on the boys going further, though it kind of was, because the next night Ben goes to talk to his third oldest son. I think his name's I think it's Henry. Henry might be the youngest. I don't know. One of the boys, and he's talking about him, like, hey, like, he's like, Dad, like, I killed those men today, and and it's like hard, but then he says, I'm glad I did that, and whatnot, and you can see on Mel's face, and he's like conflicted. It's like, I've raised his boys to be protectors and to be killers when they need to kill, but they also saw my old self come through, and my anger and unleashed, and he's recognizing, like, this is the consequences of war, and war has come to our front door, like I said it would, and so at that moment, this is when this kind of started the second act for the most, somewhat, I guess. I don't know. This propels the story forward, because Mel decides, I'm going to go fight. He's lost his son. He's realized the war's here. I need to protect my home, and the right thing to do is to go fight. And so he does. And he says goodbye to his family. You have a scene with his daughter, where his daughter hasn't talked for like years, his youngest daughter, and she won't say goodbye to him, and so she's obviously upset, and we'll get more of that later. So he goes off, and he's going to go fight for the Continentals, fight for his men, and he's going to do it militia style. So instead of being on the front lines, he's going to lead a militia to go fight off different camps and groups of the British and so forth. And I think this is where we get introduced to our other villain. He might have been, or well, he came in a little earlier, but well, no, never mind. It was right after he left. Yeah. But anyways, we get introduced to General Cornwallis, which very, very infamous general during the War for Independence, general for the Brits. So he's one of our main antagonists and villains, and we learn that he's very, very wise in warfare. He knows his stuff. He's studied warfare a lot, and there's one scene where they capture where they defeat a group of Brits, and they find a bunch of letters from Cornwallis, letters and diaries of Cornwallis. He's stuff he's written down and studied about warfare, which actually is tied into later on and comes full circle in the third act, which I thought was well done. I think there were a lot of threads that they did a good job tying up in this movie. They also go out and start recruiting other men to fight for the cause, and they go to different towns. Gabriel goes to this one town. He goes right into their church and interrupts their church service, which was whatever. And this is also the town where the girl he likes resides, and he goes in and says, "Hey, like, I need men who are ready to fight." And pretty much all the men in the town, in the church, are like, "No, we're not going to join the war effort. We know what it's going to cost. We're not going to do it." And it's actually the girl who, sees the bravery of the boy that they both like each other. She sees him, and then she stands up and she's like, "Okay, I'm gonna tell pretty much these men who are being cowards, why it is that they need to go fight," which I thought was actually good. It wasn't it wasn't like, oh, the woman stands up and does the right thing, or the woman's like, "I'm gonna go fight for these men." It's like, no, she's like, she's acting as like a judge upon these cowards, which even in the Old Testament and Scripture, oftentimes, well, not often, it didn't happen that often, but usually when a woman is saying something that a man should, or pronouncing a judgment upon a man, or judging a man for not being faithful, it's a sign that the men are cowardly. It's a judgment upon the men for not standing up and doing the right thing, that a woman has to stand up and speak, and so forth. So I don't know. Did you interpret that any other way, or have an issue with that?
Yeah.
Because then all the men are like, "Okay, you're right. We need to fight," and so they all, pretty much all of them, most of them, join the war effort. And he also then afterwards asked the girl's daughter, the girl's father, for if he could write letters to her, basically, if he could court her.
So then that's when the priest also went, and they're like,
okay. Oh,
what did they call him? A father? Did they say father? Is that what they called the priest, or did he say priest?
They're not Catholic. They would be Protestant.
I don't remember what he said. Anyway, let's just say he called him priest. He's like, "Priest, what are you doing?" And he's like, "A shepherd must tend to his flock, and when necessary, fight off the wolves."
It must have been flawed, but yeah,
it was a great line.
It was good. And man, I could talk about this movie for 4 hours.
Yeah.
Just real quick, this is helpful. During this time, like, that was common. The pastors of these churches would take up arms. Like, there were literally men who would wear their war garments, underneath their robe, their clergy robes, in order to be ready to fight when it's needed, and also sometimes go to war right after they're preaching. They pull out their muskets and their rifles, and like, okay, we're gonna fight. That's the reason why the War for Independence was actually often called the Presbyterian Revolt, because the Presbyterians, the Protestant Christians, were the ones that were fighting for and preaching, against the tyranny of Britain, and preaching to their people to stand up and fight against the tyranny, and to take up arms in a just way, because this was a just war. And they're applying the word of God to the situation, to their time, but not only applying it, but saying, "I'm going to stand up and fight as well. I'm going to take up arms, and I'm going to lead my people. I'm going to lead my sheep, my flock, to go and win back our independence." And so there's so many awesome stories of pastors that were doing that. They would be called the black robed regiment, because they would have to wear black robes as preachers to go and fight. So, anyways. cool stuff. I like that they included that in this film, where like the pastor he was reluctant. He didn't want to fight, but he knew that was the right thing to do. And so, being a man of conviction and ready to lead his flock to fight off the wolves, he goes to fight. So yeah. Jumping ahead, we get through a whole montage of different fights that they have, different victories that this militia, because they've Benjamin and his son Gabriel have recruited a lot of men for the cause. They blow up one of Cornwallis's ships during like a party
they're becoming really infamous within the British, and they are well aware of what they're doing, and they're trying to get them to stop. Yeah, they're becoming a big pain in their butts.
And figure out who. Oh yeah, so yeah, pretty much. And Mel's character is being referred to as the Ghost, because he's leading this militia and causing a lot of problems to the British Army.
Oh yeah, so one of the things that happen in this movie, because this is like the invention of not just standing in line to get shot at and actually hiding behind trees and actually being smart with war. And he even says in the first act of the movie, or well, actually it might be during this time, he's like I don't know what he says, but he's basically saying like, we need to stop standing in line to get shot at and actually take action or something like that. And so they're actually not just standing in line to get shot at, they're hiding behind trees, they're setting up traps to kill these guys and hiding, and it's the invention of not just standing in line to get shot.
Right, which Cornwallis, he being a master of war, that he's winning all his battles. They're making their way north because he's trying to get to George Washington, who's fighting up north, and Cornwallis is leading his armies up that way. But this militia, this secret militia, is causing a lot of problems and preventing him from making his way up north. He's cutting their supply lines, taking out different regiments of the British soldiers and so forth. And anyways, causing a lot of problems.
Yeah, he's complaining to his corporal that he should be in the northern what's the state? Northern no.
Maryland?
North Carolina.
No, wait.
He's like, I should be in North Carolina, not in South Carolina,
North Carolina.
Celebrating.
Not South,
and why am I not up there? And it's because this militia is not letting anybody go up north, and they're taking out lots of different battalions and stuff like that.
Yeah, a lot of great scenes throughout that part of the movie. Yeah, I'm trying to. And we get more of Jason Isaacs' character, which I'm gonna keep calling him that, but I should probably call him William Tavington. I'll try to remember Tavington. It's a little hard to remember the names of this movie, I'll be honest.
Well, they don't say him a lot.
You also find out that's true, they don't. So Mel's son Thomas, or Benjamin's son, he had these little figurines of British and Continental soldiers that he had made before he died, and they're with him actually when he died, and Benjamin picks him up and keeps them, and then you see him at one scene where he's melting him down and making bullets for his musket, and that plays a part later on in the film, tied together pretty well. But it's also symbolic, like he's something that was important to his son. This son made, he's going to use to take out the men who killed his son. This, I will say, this is a revenge story done really well, where this man he doesn't want to fight. Then, because of what happens to his family, he chooses to fight and go after the Brits who have caused this, who have brought this war to his home.
Well, it's like a revenge against injustice. Have broken is what it is.
Rules of war.
And that's why it's okay, and it's
absolutely good. But even specifically with Isaac's character, there's one scene in the third act that I just absolutely loved, and how they handle it. And I don't think I've ever been more pumped watching a movie scene. Jason Isaacs, Tavington, the Colonel. So, anyways.
Yeah, what else happens in the second act before we get to the third act?
Sure. Yeah. You have
Because, man, when does the third act start? Would it be the church scene? I would say that's the.
yeah. I was between the church scene and when Gabriel
Yeah.
dies.
Yeah. Well,
jumping
it's a really long third
So
act, and then
right.
the dark. It's a really weirdly structured third act too. Because then when you have that
Yeah.
repentance and all that,
Yeah.
but we'll get into that. Yeah. So if there's
Right. Yeah, you used to have more interactions between him and Ben and his son. His son finally asked him like, hey, like all these other men know about you, know who you are and what you did, but I'm your son and I don't even know. And so he's still a little reluctant, but then he does share like, hey, during the French and Indian War, he goes on this whole story about how vicious he was to the enemy and so forth, and he's just became notorious for his vileness and fighting this and how he fought and his tactics and stuff. And he's haunted by that. He's haunted by the men he killed and the way that he went about it and so forth. And he fought with no quarter, and who cares? He didn't care if they surrendered or anything. He killed everyone in his path and so forth. And they didn't like unpack it a whole lot, but that's basically enough for us to understand, okay, this is why he is who he is, and this is his past, and this is what he's wrestling with throughout the film. Oh yeah, we have one scene where a bunch of the families of the men who joined the militia, their families are being threatened and are actually being. Oh, they find out that they're threatened, and so they go off to go and protect and fight for them, and then a bunch of the men get caught and are going to be hanged. So a bunch of the soldiers that fight for the militia, and so they also at one point captured Cornwallis's Great Danes. He had 2 dogs, so he holds on to them, and then he takes the dogs to Cornwallis and offers a deal. And he says, okay, let's let my men go. Here's your dogs, but also I have a bunch of your soldiers held at gunpoint, and we will kill them if you don't let my men go. And of course, we find out that they were not real. They just created scarecrows of men in red coats, and we had a funny scene where they let him go, and he keeps the dogs, but then he whistles as he's leaving. The dogs actually leave Cornwallis and follow after Ben. And but you also have a scene where we meet where Ben and Tavington interact. They cross paths, which I think this is the first time after his son dies. I'm pretty certain. And the two of them interact. So we'll just say that that's the case. So he obviously finds out like this is the ghost, and why is he being let go? Why aren't we killing him right now? So he's freaking out, and he's like, oh well, and then one of the other colonels are like, well, they're not retaliating, that they're leaving in peace. And then he's like, oh yeah, we'll see about that. So he goes and intimidates Benjamin and talks about his son and how he took pleasure in killing his son, and he thought, how stupid he thought the boy was, and he deserved to die and so forth. And then Mel like turns and he's like, okay, I'm like, he's ready to throw fists, he's ready to cause trouble, and this was kind of the first not the first, but evidence. This was pretty evident that he's changed, that he's changing at least, because the character from the beginning of the movie would have punched him in the face, would have knocked him out, likely would have been foolish and let his pride cloud him and take over, and not, I mean, like, this man's a piece of crap. Like, I wanted to punch him in the face. But anyways, he decides not to. He's like, he's resolved, which is contrast to even Isaac's character, who probably in that place he would have beat him up because he's uncontrolled. He doesn't have self-control and whatnot. So showing the difference between the two men. So they go off, and then they make at that point they make a plan to Cornwallis and Tavington. They're like, okay, well let's strike a hard blow on them. Where does they know that he's the ghost.
Tavington was telling Cornwall that he's like, I can defeat them, but I have to do it the way I want to, with no rules of war, no honor. I'm gonna do whatever I want to do.
They make a plan, make a deal, and he says, "Well, okay, I'll give you a plot of land once we take over the colonies and so forth." So yeah, there's that, and so he goes and we didn't even talk about his sister-in-law. So Mel's character, his wife's sister, she's been looking after the boys. She's the kids. She's being a mother to them, and there's some chemistry there, which I thought was good. It makes sense that it'd be the sister who's like she's their aunt, but she's also a motherly figure to them, especially after they lost their mother, and he also was attracted to her, and there's a relationship that's brewing there, and you gotta have some romance, I guess. So she's at their plantation, and Jason Isaacs knows that, so he's like, hey, let's send men to their house, and let's go after them. So they go, and he actually leads them and goes into the house, but they're hiding, and he can't find anyone, so they decide to burn it down but the kids and the aunt and the kids, they get out, but they burn the house. And then I didn't really understand this, but for some reason Mel's character Benjamin, he knows that this is happening, so he shows up like right away. And is like saves the day.
Yeah. It was the son first that arrived. It was Heath Ledger's character,
right?
And then eventually it was Mel Gibson's character.
Yeah. Okay. Which they show up, and then Benjamin, he leads the men away from the plantation and away from his family, while Gabriel stays with the family to take care of them and to make sure they get to a safe place. And do we get much from that fight? I don't think so. They just leave him away, which was great. And then they meet up at they have a place that they can go where it's like another plantation. Well, it's a place with a bunch of slaves, I guess. And so they take him there, and we find out that that not only is Tavington, causing trouble for Benjamin's family, but he's actually going after all the families of the men, because he got their names. So he is attacking and burning down buildings and attacking these families. And then one character that we meet early on when he gets recruited, I think his name is John. Yeah, he's John. It's John. Which it was a decent character and a good contrast with our hero, but he shows up to his home and sees that it's been burnt, but also his wife and son were killed. And it even shows his son has a toy gun that was by his side, meaning like he took it out and he's like ready to fight and defend his mom. But this completely breaks him, John, and he ends up shooting himself right then and there. Which shows that he's a tragic character who couldn't handle losing his family, couldn't handle the horrors of war, and so he ends his life right then and there in front of the other men, which eventually leads to most of the men abandoning the cause. And you also Gabriel and the girl, they get married because they go back to her home to kind of stay there for a bit, where also Benjamin has his family there as well, so they'll meet up and reconcile or get together and so forth. And then this is kind of the start of the third act. I mean, because this is when they go off to finish Tavington, because they're like, okay, because he leaves one last time because they have that scene with his daughter, where his daughter, who hasn't talked at all. I don't know if you want to unpack this at all.
So she...
I'll probably cry if I do. So
she didn't want to say bye to her dad at the beginning, and
she did speak at one point, but that was to Gabriel and her aunt, the aunt.
I don't remember what she said.
And she said, I hate him. I don't ever want to see him again.
So she was very bitter towards her dad, and not wanting to speak to him, look at him, or have any part of him. So at this point, when he's leaving again, he tries one more time. He gets down on his knee to say bye to her, and she just ignores him. I think she just turns and walks away or something. And he just kind of sits there defeated, and he's like, all right. So he gets up, says one last bye to everybody, and leaves. And then the girl, crying, she changes her mind, runs after him, and yells his name.
It says, Papa, don't go.
Yeah, Papa, don't go. What do they embrace each other, right? And then
yeah, and she's like, please don't leave, please don't leave me, please don't.
Yeah, she's begging him not to leave, and he has a duty, and
he promises her that he will return.
Yeah. So where are they heading at this point? I can't remember. They're going to kill, or trying to kill, Tavington because of all because he's attacking all the families and hitting them at home, and so where was Tavington at this point?
He was the next scene we see him in is he's still going after all the families.
Okay, yeah.
And so we have the scene at the church.
Yeah.
Which is one of the worst.
That's the next
most
scene.
gut-wrenching.
Yeah. Yeah. So this would be definitely the beginning of the third act.
Yes.
I would say.
So we have a scene where everyone's pretty much abandoned them, but then but then when they think all is lost, some men are come back and they're like, okay, we will fight, even though you others have abandoned you. We're gonna fight. We're gonna do this, and then we cut to Tavington at the church, where the girl, now Gabriel's wife.
Yeah, so his wife and father and mother-in-law are literally riding into town, like they literally just got there after leaving Gabriel and where they were. They're just now riding into town, and then there's a soldier or whatever, a red coat, that tells them that everybody needs to meet in the church.
Needs to gather in the church.
Everybody needs to gather in the church because the colonel wants to speak with everybody. And so they go in, and Tavington rides in to the church on his horse. And man, what does he say to them? I don't remember.
He asked, like, okay, you guys have been fraternizing with
he wanted
the
information from anybody willing to give him information.
You will be forgiven of your crimes against the crown.
Yeah, you'll be forgiven. And then one guy speaks up and gives him some information. And then he's basically says, thank you, and see you later. And then he's like, hey, what do you mean? You just said that you'd forgive me. And he says, yes, you will. But that's between you and God.
That's between you and God.
And he leaves, closed the door. They burn down the church with everybody in it. Yeah, very difficult scene. And this is Gabriel's wife gets burned alive. His mother and father-in-law get burned alive, along with all the other men and women in the church. And these are all the, it's
town.
Yeah, there's mostly, I don't think there was any like well-abled men. All the well-abled men were at war and fighting.
Yes.
And this was just the injured men or the women and the children, and they all get burned alive.
Yeah.
Very difficult
Which
scene.
is like awful. And like this is one of like the over-the-top scenes where it's like I even looked into it just to make sure like this never happened.
Yeah.
Like something this awful. Like this is like on the highest level, like horrific war crimes that people don't commit, unless they're absolutely that terrible and that awful, just horrific. So I mean, it's a little over the top, but as far as the story and the movie and the plot and the villain, like it was good. But we also are introduced to another character early on who's with he's like a secondhand man to Tavington. Mm-hmm. This is played by, he's one of the Baldwin brothers, actually. I think it's Adam Baldwin. Mm-hmm. And he
the most normal
he's
looking
like,
Baldwin.
Right. Yeah. So he lives in the States, and he's willing to fight for the British,
mm-hmm.
and so he represents those people that were fighting for the British. And he's really reluctant to burn down the church, while Jason Isaacs is like, I don't care, like do it. and so he's reluctant. And he actually does throw the first torch though, but you see the conflict in his face, and that was helpful just to see the contrast between the characters. But they didn't do much more with that. I don't think we had got any more of his character, but there's that. So, anyways, they find out, and our main characters find out. They get to the town, and it's just a complete ghost town. I thought that was pretty well done, where it's like there's no one here, and so like this is, all is lost. But they even unpack that a little more. Or there's more of all is lost. But this is like. Everything they've been fighting for is just in ruins and lost. Like even their families are dead. One of our main characters, his family lived there as well, and they're gone. And he's actually, this guy's in I think it was Blade. But anyways, and the Gotham TV show. But anyways, so they find out they're all dead, that they burned in the church. And so Gabriel goes after Tavington and finds him, along with some other men, along with the preacher as well, the pastor of the church. So they go and confront them, and they catch him by surprise, and then they have a big fight. A lot of it was really slow-mo, but I thought it was fine. It was well done. And Gabriel is about to kill. He actually shoots Tavington, and Tavington's on the ground, and he pretends he's dead. And Gabriel grabs a knife and goes up to him. He's about to stab him, and in his pride and arrogance, he's blinded by the fact that he's not dead, and he turns around, shoots or stabs him with his sword, and Gabriel dies. And you kind of see that he was blinded by his desire for revenge, and now Benjamin has now lost another son, his oldest son, which that you can just Mel Gibson acted really well. That just awesome. It's great acting in this scene where he's broken. He is at the end of his rope, and and much like the John, the other character who killed himself, it's like he's at that point where it's like he's lost. He doesn't have a wife. He's lost two of his boys to this war. He's watched two of his boys die. I mean, he didn't actually see Gabriel dying, but no, Gabriel was still alive when he got to him, and he died in his arms. So yeah, and so he's at his wit's end. He's broken. He's lost everything, and so the question is what's he gonna do now? And he's actually at the point where he decides, I'm not gonna fight. He tells the general, I this is not worth it anymore. I've lost too much. I'm not gonna fight anymore. But then another one of my favorite scenes is his son was stitching together a American flag that was ripped early on. Gabriel was, and so Benjamin's packing up to go home.
So when we see this flag earlier in the movie, when Gabriel gets this flag, he was looking at it, and one of the guys told him it's not worth it.
Oh yes,
yeah, and so then
very symbolic.
Yeah, that was basically all that was. But then we get the fulfillment of that here, and we see the flag again. Benjamin has it. You can continue and finish that.
Yeah. He stitches together the flag. They say earlier he's told earlier it's not worth it, but he does stitch it together with a new patch, which is I think also symbolic. It's like death and resurrection, new life. Where death is, where things have been ripped, it's restored. And then Benjamin sees the flag, and he is inspired. He is driven. He's like, I'm going to fight. I'm going to do what's right. I was going to say this line earlier, but one thing that we know is that war. I don't know who said this. I know someone has said this, but war is not won by fighting what's in front of us, but it's won by defending and fighting for what's behind us. Benjamin, though he's lost so much, he knows that he still has a family, and then a country and men who have been following him, men that are looking up to him. And what's also awesome is that even after he decides not to fight, all the men that he's been with through all this decide to go fight. They've also lost everything, but he's led them to the point where they can make their own choice and make the right choice. So he's been a good leader to raise up other men. They go off to fight, but then he shows up with the flag, and he goes in front of the army and is ready to go out and do the right thing and fight this final battle for his country. And so they meet up the one last time to make a plan for what's ahead. He takes the last figurine from his son, makes it into a bullet, and it shows it has a little red mark on it, which he'll use later. And they line up to fight against the Brits, and they do a strategy. Oh yeah, and this is where the letters that they got from Cornwallis early on, the diaries, played a good part, because they know that Cornwallis would not expect a militia to stand on the front lines, but they line up with their militia and to go out and attack the
he sees it.
Attack the
he
army
sees
led
it as a
by
weak
Mel's character.
as a weakness, if it's the militia that are in front, because he knows that they will cower when the bullets start flying.
Right. And I can't remember if it was when he showed up, but like basically he shows up and they're all cheering like huzzah, 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 and is ready to go and fight. And now Benjamin's come in and he's like, I'm gonna do what's right. I'm gonna fight for my family. I'm gonna fight for my country, for our freedom, for my future generations. I'm going to stand up. I'm gonna fight. I'm gonna lead these men to war, whether we live or die. We're gonna fight. And you just see the inspiration that it brings. The men are just revitalized and is ready to go to war and to do what needs to be done, even though they know they may die. So yeah, so they go to war, and they attack, bring the militia in, and then at one point they retreat, but purposely, because then there's a bunch of soldiers on the other over the hill. We also see the pride and arrogance of Tavington, because he goes against the orders of Cornwallis and goes in and fights, and then they're getting attacked. The Brits are now under siege because they didn't see all the soldiers sitting back over the ridge, and so forth. But then when they're about to get as they're fighting, and the Brits are actually winning, and the men are starting to retreat. The men that are holding the line are beginning to retreat, because a bunch of them are dying, and Tavington is off fighting over to the side. And this is one of my probably my favorite scenes in any movie, where he looks over at Tavington, and the character at the beginning of the movie, what he would have done was he would have went after Tavington and killed him, because he had an opportunity to. He could have shot him. He could have run up, got close, shot him. He could have stabbed him with his sword or with his axe, or cut him up with his axe, whatever. He could have gone after him and killed him. But then he sees that the line is breaking, the men are retreating, and so instead of taking revenge and doing the revenge route, he says, "No, I'm going to continue to lead my men. I'm going to encourage my men, inspire my men to go and hold the line and fight forward, keep moving forward, and do the right thing." And so you see him in his leadership, though this wicked man has taken everything from him. He's like, "I'm going to do the right thing." And so he takes his flag, and the music score is going. Oh, by the way, score by John Williams, the man who did Star Wars.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. John Williams did the score, which is one of the most incredible scores in a movie.
Yeah.
And so as the music's playing, it's in slow-mo. Benjamin is taking the flag to the front line and saying, hold the line. And the rest of his men see him. And he's like, oh, the men who are cowering and running away, they're like, yes, we're going to take the line. So they move forward. They fight go up to the front lines, followed by Mel as he's taking down soldiers, and he's carrying the flag. He puts the flag, I don't know if he puts the flag down, but he's waving the flag. And he's like, let's do this. Let's win this war. Let's win this battle. Let's not retreat. Let's fight forward. So he does. And then he's given an opportunity to fight Tavington. And I don't know if you want to unpack this one or not.
No, you can keep going. You probably remember it better than I do.
Okay. So he sees Tavington, and he uses actually the flag to stab the horse as Tavington's running after him. They're running at each other. Stabs the horse. Tavington falls off, and then Mel loads his pistol with the bullet made by his son's minifigure thing, puts it in, and then shoots. But as he's about to shoot, there's an explosion behind him, so he kind of misses. He shoots Tavington in the shoulder, and so which I kind of wish he would have finished him off with that bullet, but
yeah,
it's what it is. Right. So that then they go kind of man on man combat, 1-on-1 combat with swords and axes. Tavington's got a sword and a knife. Benjamin's got the axe and the knife. So they're fighting. Mel's getting beat up and cut up, and we think he's about to die, and then he actually does the same thing that his son did.
Yeah.
But reversed. So
he
in his air. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, yeah. So Tavington at this moment walks up to him just as Gabriel was walking up to Tavington earlier, thinking he's dead, but going in for that final blow to finish him off. Gabriel was in his hot head because he had just lost his wife and his mother and father-in-law, so he was in very much in revenge mode,
being fueled
fueled by that and going to kill him. But in this scene, Tavington is being arrogant and just wants to kill him just out of spite and hatred. And then just as Tavington turned and stabbed Gabriel, at this moment, Benjamin turns and stabs Tavington. And he didn't even see it coming, which is the greatest part, is that he kills him in the exact same way that Tavington killed his son, and it was a great ending.
And Tavington, as he's walking up to him, I think he says something like, "You were not a good man, or you're not a real man," or something like that. And then once Benjamin's about to stab him, he's like, "You're right, but my boys were." Mm-hmm. And then you finish them off. So like that was really good. So like they're better men than I am, and acknowledging that he's raised his boys to be men. He raised his boys right. And he's lost 2 of them. They died being greater men than Tavington was, for sure, but also greater men than he is, and so Tavington is he dies, and the Continentals, the army continues to fight forward, and they defeat. Oh, and one thing is there's someone else grabs the flag. We don't even know who it is, but he grabs the flag. One of Benjamin's men, and he leads the charge with Benjamin. Either we think he's he could be dead, but he isn't dead. But anyways, he leads them to victory pretty much, and just shows that how much of a leader and how inspiring Benjamin's character was. And then you cut to Cornwallis as he's realizing that he's about to lose not only this battle but the war, and so forth. And you see his arrogance because he's not willing to surrender. He actually sends one of his men out to do it, or one of his colonels to take the fall for it and surrender, because he doesn't want that to be on his record. And then talks about later how he goes after George Washington and his men. He ends up losing and so forth. So and the Continentals defeat the Brits. So, and Benjamin survives. He goes home, and he goes back to his old home, which had been burnt down. And there he finds out they're rebuilding it and restoring it. And you have just this hopeful scene where they say, like, we thought, this is going to be a new world. It was actually one of the slaves who had now been freed. We didn't get into his character very much. Yeah. I do have a comment on that, but he says, we want to build we want to start this new world, this new land and this new place. And we thought it'd be best to start at your home. So they're building him a new house and so forth. And so it's just a hopeful ending. And that's the end of our film. Yeah. Pretty incredible. Great. Just well done story. Yeah. Very inspiring. Just makes you feel very patriotic. Yeah. Of course. But also just it inspires you to be willing to fight for what's right and to be a man with a backbone, and to have courage to stand up against your enemies and fight when you're called to fight, and do the right thing when others won't, and when you're up against the ropes, and when life is hard, and when you don't want to do the right thing. And it's just inspiring in so many ways. Yeah. Such a great movie. Yeah, for sure. Well, did you have a comment on the slave? Oh, yeah. So a lot of this movie, Mel Gibson really incorporate a lot of modern day concepts of freedom into the film. Like, not that like they weren't fighting for independence, not that even slaves were granted freedom. They were promised freedom actually if they joined the war effort during this time. Apparently some slaves didn't actually get the freedom that they were promised, but some did, you know. So like there was a thing where they said if you fight for the, you know, George Washington's army, then if you fight for 12 months, then you could be set free and no longer a slave. And so if there's one character that I thought was well done, who is a slave, you know, he in fact his 12 months are up at one point, and then he's like he has a choice to just stop fighting and go home and be free, or not, and he decides to keep fighting, and so he continues to finish off the war and so forth. And so like it wasn't as accurate as like they made it seem like that even the continental states were mostly kind to the slaves, and that's not necessarily true. Some were, and a lot of people were friendly, even if they had slaves. Like they treated them well, but some did not, and still saw them as less than human, and so forth. Most people did during that time, and so they just didn't incorporate that a whole lot, and I kind of understand why. But so there's that. I don't know if you have anything else to say about that.
No, there's just that scene in the beginning where he's like, "We're not slaves. We actually work here by choice," and
which I mean, I'm sure there were some like wealthy families that did treat their slaves that way, where it's like they're, you know, they work for them, but they do pay them, and they have freedom. But mostly for most people that wasn't the case.
For sure.
So, in fact, the person that Mel's character was loosely based on, he owned slaves. And they were actual slaves. You know, so it's what it is.
Yeah, no, this movie definitely makes you think of our modern times and just where we're at. And
there were a lot of aspects of like when it came to the slaves and stuff that you would not see in movies today. I'll say that.
No, that's true.
Also, one thing you didn't see is women going to fight. Not a single woman took up arms.
And they didn't ask. They didn't ask any women to.
No,
like they were desperate at times, but they weren't even desperate enough to ask the women to join in the fight. But no, like you just see like what why these men were fighting and what they were fighting for, and you just think of like the oppression that we're under now by our country, and I mean, like with the attempted assassination of Trump and how it was so evident who was actually behind that, and nobody bats an eye, nobody cares. It's just very wild. We live in a wild time, a weak time, a time of weak men and men that aren't willing to do anything, and none of our leaders fought against it at all, and nobody cared at all. And I mean, there was a court, I don't know if it's still going on, but a court case with that lady that's the head of Secret Service, but
well, she ended up stepping down. And I mean, there should be a lot more investigations happening, but who knows if they will.
I mean, back in the day, that attempt like that, and with the evidence of who was behind it, wars would have been started over that.
Well, I used this quote in the cold open, but I'll say it again. This is but a quote from Pastor Douglas Wilson, and this could be a good way to finish this off. But desperate times call for faithful men and not for careful men. The careful men come later and write the biographies of the faithful men, lauding them for their courage. You know, we are in desperate times, and we need faithful men. Men who are courageous, men who have backbones, men who are willing to stand for what's right, and not just take up arms and defend their family and their country, but to say hard things and to do hard things and to do the right thing when others won't. And we don't see that anymore. We see careful men who are cowardice and that are afraid. Those are the ones that will that are not. Those are the men that are not known in history. The history knows men who were faithful, who were courageous, who did stand up, and who fought. And history will also know a lot of men who are courageous. Will not know a lot of men who are courageous that but they don't do it to be known. They do it because they know what's right, and they're men of conviction.
Yeah.
Who will fight for their families, fight for their countries, fight for their Lord and King, who is Lord of all, and whom they follow, and whom they bow to only to, and whom they bow their knees to no other but him. And we hope that we are those men as well. And I love movies like this that encourage us, inspire us towards that. And you think about this movie, like, takes place 300, not even 300 years ago.
Yeah.
That's a few generations.
Yeah. That's wild.
And see where we are today.
Yeah.
And who knows where we'll be in 3 generations from now.
Yeah.
And how history will see our time in our day and age.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because, I mean, we don't live in a time where it's like, oh, yeah, we can get a group of 30 guys together with guns and take over the country like they did back then. Like, that's not how it'd work. But what we need are we live in a media war world where whoever controls the media controls the people, and we see very heavily who owns that. And we have to, that's why we're building this media company, film and media company, and we're fighting that battle for sure.
We also live in a day and age where a simple cold can shut down an entire world.
Yeah.
And show who really is courageous and who's really willing to stand up against tyranny and against those that do harm to a nation, to people, those that are willing to control the masses through their own agendas and their own ways of doing so.
Yeah.
And a lot of men buckled and faltered in that time. And not all, though. Some did stand up and some did fight.
Yeah.
And we need more men like that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we it's a different time for sure, and the fighting is weird. Like, the battles are weird. It's not like it's not face to face anymore. It's
right.
It's all information. It's media, internet, information, flow of information, and eventually it could lead to a real war or something, a real civil war. And
our great grandchildren will talk about the meme wars that their great grandfathers fought in.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
But Brave, I mean, I don't know. We got people like Trump, Elon Musk, who are really fighting these wars and these battles of media and information.
It's crazy. Those are the men that are standing up.
Yeah.
Those are the men that are fighting.
I know.
Yeah, like, not that others aren't, but
yeah. No, for sure.
I mean. It's just God tells the greatest stories.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you have someone like Trump.
This all started from putting your kids in public schools, just so you know. That's where all of this started.
Well, that'll get us kicked off YouTube. Okay. But you're right.
Yeah. So,
nah, I'm just kidding. I don't think they will. But
no, that won't get us kicked off.
I think we should close this one out. This was a good one.
Yeah, for sure.
So
I got a good title for it now.
Good.
The Patriot. Don't put your kids in public schools.
Yes. There you go. This is what happens.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. We should probably rate this movie.
That's true.
What would you rate this movie?
Man, I think it's longer than it needs to be. This could have been a really, like, a perfect 2-hour movie. But it was what, sure. 220, 230?
240. Well, I mean, with credits, like 235.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay, yeah.
Yep.
I don't know. I'm like a 9 on this one.
That's exactly what I was going to give it.
Sweet.
9 flat.
Wow. I think that's the first time we've ever
like
actually said the exact same number.
Score.
Yeah.
Right. That's funny.
That is funny. Cool. The Patriot 9.0.
Yep.
That puts it at our 3rd movie. Above Pig. Below Whiplash and Shawshank.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
Well, we thank you for listening to this review. We, as always, have a Patreon where we dive a little further in just some of the more interesting details. Not really about the story. Sometimes about the story, but sometimes we forget things that we wanted to mention. Yeah, our Patreon will dig a little further, and we have mini reviews, and Trenton will do a mini review this week, and yeah, I think that's it on that. Helps us when you support us on there. It helps us be able to do this, and we can continue on and continue this fight, continue this battle, and we want to continue to grow. And like we had mentioned in our movie chronicles, we are making a TV show that's also a way that we are fighting this battle, and the support that we get from here also helps us and be able to make that, and that will be exclusively released on there. At least that's the plan for the time being. And yeah, so thank you guys, and hope you enjoyed this review of The Patriot. And just remember to continue fighting. Don't give in to weakness. Be strong and brave, and stand your ground when you're called to. When the Lord tells you to stand your ground, stand your ground. Yeah, remember to glorify God and watch good movies. We're out. Bye.
See ya.